Well, thank you everybody for joining us today. I am Andrew Tonys with the Center for Rural Affairs. Just a little bit about the center. It's a small nonprofit rural community development organization based out of Lyons, Nebraska, northeast Nebraska. I'm coming to you from today from my home office in North Bend. The center has been around since, oh gosh, I forget the founding date, 1970s sometimes. They've been around for a while. And we do lots of things, things like this webinar, educational stuff for farmers. We have a whole lending program for rural small businesses. If you're interested in anything like that, please let me know and I can connect you to people who can help you out. We do work with rural grocery stores, helping them with training and organizing and grant applications and all that kind of good stuff. Um, and with that, I think we can get started here with our panel discussion about nutrient management. So thank you to our panel guests here, Clay Govier from Broken Bow, Matt Bailey from Schuyler, Greg Keller from Monroe, and Tracy Zink from Indianola. Appreciate you all being here today.
Sure thing.
I think we'll just start with some just brief introductions. Tell us a little bit about your farming operation and kind of how you've gotten interested in nutrient management as something that you want to pay attention to on your operation. And I'm just going to go across my screen here, and Clay, you are up first.
Sounds good. Yeah, well, good morning and thanks for the opportunity to share, I guess, the little bit of knowledge that I have. Yeah, Clay Govier, fifth generation farmer in the Broken Bow area, which is very central Nebraska. Um, Mostly corn and soybeans, but we do grow some yellow field peas on occasion. We grow cereal rye, and then we clean that and sell that for cover crop seed, pretty much locally. And I guess it does make some whiskey too. But a couple
Priorities.
of
I like it.
yeah, that's right. Um, yeah, and then some alfalfa. No cattle. We used to have a pretty decent sized cow calf operation, but got out of that about 15 or 20 years ago, unfortunately. So we'll see if we ever get back into that. No till, mostly center pivot irrigated. Yeah, and just, try to embrace all the, regenerative practices that we possibly can, which, I think kind of leads into the nutrient management stuff pretty heavily. But anyway, that's all you wanted, right, Andrew? Just a quick bio.
Yep, perfect.
Okay. Yep.
Thank you. Greg, let's go to you.
Morning, everybody here. So sorry I don't have a camera on my computer here. I apologize for that. Um, for corn, soybeans here in Platte County, Nebraska by Columbus. So we custom feed about 3,000 head of hogs. I bought the family farm from my parents here 4 years ago. We were 125 sow feral to finish operation, and my parents are 83 years old, so it was probably time for them to call it quit and retire, I guess. So I shut down the feral to finish operation. We just custom feed 3,000 head of hogs a year now. We're about 60% center pivot irrigation. I know you got some dryland also, but basically just corn and beans. And I got ground that's 26 years of continuous no-till. And this year we'll have ground that will be continuous cover crops after harvest every year. We drill cover crops for 11 years this year. Then some people probably know, some people probably don't know. I started with an idea 11 years ago with twin row rye on 7.5 inch spacing. So we're doing 2 rows of rye at 7.5 inch, and the other 2 rows we shut off. And we've been working with that real hard here. So we're going to do some 30-inch beans in between this year, some 7.5 inch twin row soybeans, and 30-inch corn. And we've been pushing pretty hard on the corn yields also. I've got some awards. So I'm not bragging by any means, but I do got some awards over 300 bushel, 318, 320. The highest one I've hit was about 361 bushels of corn under center pivot irrigation. That was on about 3.5 point, I don't know, just over 3 acres of ground. We did that one on. So, but trying to cut back on fertilizer, trying to cut back on micronutrients. So um, couple weeks ago here, I do some pretty wild and crazy things. So I built a worm cube, as I call it. So I built a box that's 12 by 12 by 12, and I got a hole in the top. The bottom's open. We're gonna go slam that in the ground, start collecting samples of the soil. We're gonna see how many earthworms I can get in a cubic foot. So, talking with the guy from Canada, another guy from Australia, he's told me that if I can get close to 12 earthworms in that cube, he told me that's going to be about 1 million earthworms. And I'm like, that's a lot of worms. That's yeah, it's a lot. I think I'm going to be close, but I don't think it's warm enough to go do those samples yet. But he told me 100 to 150 ton per acre of worm castings. So that's a lot of worm poo, as I call it. We're gonna dive into that pretty hard here when things warm up. I want to cut back on micronutrients, and I think doing the whole no-till cover crops, I think we can maybe start cutting back on some inputs there if those numbers are there. We do run our hog barns and our pits. We pump all that through center pivot irrigation on top of the ground. I do not knife in my the pits from the barns. We pump it over the top, so I'm probably losing some nitrogen there. But up in the hills here where I'm at, we get some devastating rains of inches at a time. The most I've seen was 7 inches at one time in 45 minutes. So when I tell you I'm 100% no-till, only thing we fix are pivot tracks, and we basically got our ditches to hold now after 11 years with the cover crops. So we're mainly just working on trying to keep the soil from moving. But I'm not sure what else you want me to screw out here, but I guess we'll run with that for now.
Sounds good. Thank you, Greg. Yeah, we'll get into some more detail here in a little bit. Tracy, tell us a little bit about your farm.
Well, good morning. It's so fun to hear wild and crazy ideas. I farm in southwest Nebraska. McCook is the main town that's next to me, and I don't get to do a lot of the fun things that with experimenting. Water is my limiting factor. And so when we get it, it's typically heavy. And so we are no-till, we do strip till on our irrigated acres. We utilize corn, soybeans, milo, and winter wheat through our rotations. Very seldom do I put beans on dry land. It, it just dries off too fast in August for that, unless it logistically fits on a pivot corner. Sometimes we compromise potential yield, etc. All that's there. Obviously, nutrient management is kind of a lifeblood for all of us. So anybody that says they're not interested is either not really farming or not doing something uh, not right, I guess I would say. My goal is, how do I protect it best? With what tools? I try to start with a best case scenario. If everything was perfect, and then I know that's not, and that won't work, and I don't have that, and I don't have this, and I can't go for that yield goal. So then down towards the bottom somewhere is where I set my plan, use what I have in terms of equipment, and do soil tests. The things that I hope to hear from this are the different application um, methods that people are using, some of the formulas for how you get it versus the how much does nitrogen cost. I don't get that formula because that's not necessarily what the crop needs when you can do that after the fact. A little bit about tie up, I hope we hear, because I think we obviously put on more micros than and majors than we need, but they're often tied up. And so that's what I'm hoping that we're able as a panel to present to people.
Thank you, Tracy. Matt Bailey, your turn.
Hey, well, good morning, everybody. Thanks for having me. Matt Bailey, family farms out by Schuyler, Nebraska. A lot of Highway 30 corridor, um, river bottom and sand is what I deal with. Um, Happen to be on the NRD board with Andrew. That's how I got drug into this, whatever the right word is, same as y'all. So, no, glad to be here. Family farms, corn and soybeans, no till quite a bit, ridge till quite a bit. We still do a lot of flood irrigation. Vast majority of our acres are pivot irrigated, but still have plenty of pipe to lay out in the summer. And One area that's kind of interesting, west of Schuyler, we do have an area that's high in nitrates because the water table's so high. I kind of joke that area, we chased off the buffalo and started planting corn. And the reality is beans on 8.5 pH don't work. So I've been working with some
Wow.
folks to make that work just to break up the cycle. So that's been fun. Um,
Hmm.
that's me. So, and family runs a ag business out here as well. My brother's a mechanic. I am a seed advisor for Golden Harvest. So that's how we also pay the bills. So there you go.
Well, thank you, Matt. Um, Not to pick on you too much, Matt. While we're talking about,
Yeah,
kind of that phase control over there by west of Schuyler,
sure.
can you touch maybe a little bit on um, like how soil testing has played a role in helping people figure out what they need to apply there and maybe changing some of their practices to improve the nitrate issues?
Sure. So big believer in soil sampling, and I don't care where you do it, how you do it, just you need to do it. Um, Really, there's that area out there is just unique. I can't even begin to describe some of the soils out there. There's in several of my fields, we have about 18 to 24 inches of blackish silt, and then below that is white clay gravel. Water table being right there. I mean, 10-foot static in some spots. So um, the organic matter is very, very high out there as well. Of course, being almost a swamp, I've on a lot of ours, it's well past 5. Which if I could take that up into some of my clay hill ground, it'd be Garden of Eden. But we have such an excess of calcium and all that. That's what jacks the pH way up. It's interesting, but that being said, just getting people aware of the excess nitrogen out there is one. Two, once you're aware of what's out there, you can start changing your practices. Um, you know, flash clear back to the 80s, everybody blew it on early, all their nitrogen and stuff on early. Well, with the water table where it's at, you know where that goes. So just through that education process, people are starting to come around. Almost everyone's side dresses out there now, doing a much better job of spoon feeding it. Nitrates are a different animal. We're not going to fix it overnight, and we know that. But through education and just some trying to break up some practices, just simple figuring out how to grow soybeans out there and overcoming some of those obstacles is huge. So I'm a numbers guy. I could talk on this a long time, but I don't want to take the spotlight forever. Andrew, you just kind of give me a nod or a laugh or whatever, and I'll shut up and we can move on. But
Can I throw a question in, Andrew? I
yeah,
think it'll
Absolutely,
kind of some
absolutely. Yeah,
segue
I want this to be a discussion for sure,
with the
Tracy.
with the agronomy. I get some strange looks because I don't use grid sampling. The majority of my fields are one soil type. I know
sure.
some of the spots that I need to worry about, but how do you recommend grid versus zone, or how many years we do it every year for just our zone? And what credits do you have people use from organic matter, um, uh, beans, the previous crops?
And that's towards me, I assume, or were you
Yeah,
talking to Andrew
sorry.
there?
Yes,
Okay.
Matt. Yeah, anybody,
Okay.
but
So I don't grid sample every acre because just like you, this Platte Valley, depending on what field we're on, some of them are very similar. It's just I'll say garbage ground all the way across, and there's only so much you can improve, and spending the money on grid sampling doesn't make a lot of sense. That being said, when we started raising soybeans, suddenly it became a little more important. Um, we did now, just because we did the soil samples, say on a quarter or so, did we change a lot of practices? No, but we began to understand the chemistry and what's going on. Why did the beans turn yellow right here and then over here they were green as a gourd all year? Well, there were several issues. pH changed a little bit more through there. Um, we did once we knew that, the next year we went and did some tissue samples just to do a little deeper dive into there and see what's going on. So now I will say on my black ground, I'll say the hill ground out of the Platte Valley, there I do like doing the grid samples. And again, we haven't done them all. Buddy of mine works for Servitech, so he's always in my ear saying you got to do every
Do
acre
it, do
all the
it.
time, and that's good, and I understand that. Um, we don't do any variable rate off the grid samples. I will literally print out the map, give it to well, usually my dad does the dry spreading, and if we can cut an 80 in half and say we only put 1152.0 on this side because this side looks okay, well, we just cut our fertilizer in half and we paid for the grids in a year.
Yeah.
So there's that. Um, that's kind of a wishy-washy answer.
No, it's
you know,
helpful. What about credits? I don't, I'm at 2 organic matter, so I can
right.
pretend
And
that I
I've
can.
got, yeah, and I've got fields that are like a 0.9.
Yeah.
So we farm a lot of sand as well.
Are you using
Honestly, the
credits?
root, oh, sorry.
No, do you take credits or is that kind of your buffer when you're running tight on application?
Well, so in the phase area we were talking about, the our NRD, the Lower Platte North, has a rubric that you work through, and you enter all your soil sample data, download your report, and it'll work through all that. Um, so all the weird acres are in that phase area, and I do just go off that.
Okay.
Um, and again, this is a different spot. I'm not saying this is true for everyone,
Mm-hmm.
but we had enough credit out there last year on, I'll just pick on one of our fields, 130 acres out there. By the rubrics or the spreadsheet that we went through, it said for 200 bushel corn, um, I believe it was 120 pounds. There was enough residual out there. So we did. We put on some with the planter. My brother came through with the colder machine, zipped on the balance. And last year was last year. There were drowned out spots. I mean, fence row to fence row, we averaged 210. Now, out of 130 acres, I'll tell you there were at least, without looking up the records, I'm going to say there were at least 10 to 15 acres that were drowned out. So that means there was still 250 bushel corn out there. And so I'm convinced you are able to mine some of those
Mm-hmm.
nutrients out there. So
Yeah, thank you. That was a good line of questions, Tracy. Appreciate it. Clay, do you have anything about soil testing in your operation you want to contribute?
Sure. Yeah, we do some soil testing. I would say we stopped doing. The only time I'm ever going to grid sample is if the NRCS is going to pay for it. It's too expensive, and
yep.
I don't know. I think just like you were talking about, Matt. You want to find the bad spots in your field, just plant beans and they'll show up. But it's usually a pH,
So
and
true.
it's not even
Yep.
pH, it's organic matter. So I mean, the hilltops in our part of the world, they were just farmed so much that we don't have any topsoil left. So the hilltops are just the clay knobs. pH is terrible. So they don't typically grow beans. Just in the last few years, we found some hybrids that are a lot more tolerant of IDC, things like that. Um, But from I don't know, we've been using composted manure on our hilltops, and that has really solved a lot of problems.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, so from soil testing, we do in season. So what we've been doing the last couple of years is we'll have our agronomist go and take tissue samples, and then right next in the same area where he's taking tissue samples, we also have him take soil samples, so we know kind of like in season what we have available in the soil, and then what's actually make it into the plant. Um, and I know there's sap analysis, and we haven't really done any of that stuff yet, just because there's not like a really handy local place to take the stuff. But we kind of think that like that gives us a pretty good idea of like, okay, well, if it's in the soil, but it's not in the plant, what's the problem? So then you can either do a a quick pass through some whatever nutrient you need through the pivot, or just kind of put in your back pocket and wait for next year to think about that stuff. But, we kind of got away from um, like variable rate fertilizing. We don't use MAP anymore. We either use composted manure or we don't do anything because I honestly think MAP, unless you're farming sand, doesn't make any sense. Um,
Do you have to incorporate the manure,
we
like work
don't.
it in?
I mean, ideally you catch a snow and it just kind of works
Oh,
it in on its own. Or
okay.
if,
So it's a fall typically.
yeah, I mean, we've had two open winters, open springs the
Yeah.
last couple of years. So, last year, we did it in March and it worked just fine because it was super dry and warm. This year we've already got it all done. Ideally, you've got some cover crop growing just to, we get so many bad winds around here that, things do move. So that at least if you have some corn stubble, some sort of residue or cover crop or something to catch that. But and this will go into more of the nutrient management, what I actually use on the farm. But I'm pretty satisfied that MAP is a product we shouldn't even be using generally. So that's why I don't use variable rate fertilizer or variable rate
Sure.
dry spread. We dry spread elemental sulfur and dry humics, and that's about it. Maybe some AMS first thing in the spring, depending on if it's going to corn or whatever. But yeah, so soil testing in season, tissue testing and soil testing, just kind of mostly focused on the corn, because that's just where your higher input dollars are. So you gotta need to max things out. We don't do a heck of a lot on soybeans, just kind of like very randomly spot testing, like, oh, here's a bad spot, let's see what's going on there, or here's a really good spot, let's see what's going on there. So then we can maybe attack that the next year. But typically your good spots are like, well, the pH is about 7 and you got, good, decent organic matter. I mean, it's no brainer. Your good soil is going to make good beans. So,
Yeah.
and usually that's not, I don't know, it's not totally wasting your money, but unless there's some sort of actionable item on it, I just, we don't spend our money that way. So
Good.
that's tissue or soil testing on our farm.
Yeah, appreciate that, Clay. I did forget to give a plug to the Nebraska Conservation Mentorship Network, which everybody who's participating in this is a member of. I put a link to our website in the chat. So take a look at that. It's a great group of farmers. And I hope what's becoming clear in this conversation is Nebraska is a geographically and climatically diverse state, and there's no one right way to farm across the state. So that's why we have this broad perspective that you're hearing from today. So thank you guys. Appreciate that. Greg, do you have anything to add about soil testing in your operation?
We've been working with Central Valley Ag here for 20 plus years, so we have all of our ground grid sampled, and the only place we've gone back and re-gridded again is there at the farm with the hog operation because we are applying quite a bit of the manure there from the hog barns there, so we wanted to make sure we were in compliance. So we will go back in there at the farm on those 2 quarters, and about every 4 years we'll have them regrid it just to make sure that we aren't in trouble because I don't want to be over applying on that end. But otherwise, I've been putting on 125 pounds of mez from Central Valley Ag on corn stalk ground in the spring, and on bean ground we've been putting on 150 pounds of mez on the soybean stubble in the spring. I do not like applying in the fall over the winter. After 2019, we had all that flooding and snow and rain here. We changed because I was concerned about the runoff, and everybody remembers 19 very well with all the snow and the rain and the flooding here. We were shut down, but that morning after we had all that rain overnight, I went out and I drove, and I could see a lot of the topsoil had washed. A lot of the snow was basically gone, but I don't apply anything in the fall or wintertime. It's springtime. So, but where I want to go with this here, I guess we're also doing with the cover crops here. We're pulling soil, or excuse me, not soil samples. We're pulling cover crop samples now, So I like to get my rye about close to knee high, and we'll go out there, harvest about a 55-gallon plastic barrel from Menards, send that into Midwest Labs. We're trying to see what's in the cover crops now, what we're harvesting. So was it 2 years ago we pulled some. We had 52 pounds of available nitrogen in the rye. So I got some other friends online I talked with. They thought that maybe 25 pounds would be available of the 52, about half of it roughly. So we're trying to cut back there too on nitrogen with cover crops. I'm also trying to get some vetch into my operation here to produce some free nitrogen. But you know, we're doing things a little bit differently than everybody else. So the last 2 years, 24, 25, I have not applied any micronutrients now. I think with the long-term no-till of 26 years and 11 years with the cover crops now, I think my earthworm populations are maybe high enough now. If they're getting 100, 150 ton of worm castings out there, that's a lot of free micronutrients. But we aren't going to know too much more on that here till, maybe here in the next couple of weeks here, we'll start pulling some samples here to see what that shows. But I think I'm maybe to the point I won't have to maybe apply too much more micronutrients, unless we need to fix the pH. But I'm seriously trying to cut back as much as I can. And I said, I'm pushing cover crops. I'm pushing cover crops really, really hard. I've got a lot of my neighbors that have started here in the last 2 to 3 years are playing with it. We also do custom drilling. I also sell rye, but we're trying to get more of a cover crop mix in ours and play with it a little bit here too. But I've got, oh wow, how many neighbors I got started here now? Multiple neighbors. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. I've got 7 neighbors now that are starting to play with cover crops. I just got them started here last year to where we drilled for them and we sold them rye. Some of them are doing their ditches only, and some are doing the whole field. And I think after about 2 to 3 years of continuous no-till and with the cover crops, you're going to see a massive change in your soil structure, and the earthworm populations come up pretty quick. But so I'm more on the regenerative side of farming, no-till, cover crops. I also switched to GMO-free corn. So I was with DeKalb for 29 years. I quit. We have had so many problems with Southern rust with the DeKalb corn. I found a company, actually they found me. I found a company out of Minnesota called Bass Hybrids. So they have naturally or natively bred the rootworm and BT into the corn plants, into the roots and the stalks, and raising it GMO free. So I'm not spraying any Roundup on it. I'm also trying to cut all the Roundup out of my operation also, but I'm still using chemicals. So when we hauled in that corn, we were 98.5 to 100% pure GMO free corn. And I did receive a 60-cent premium on that corn here at my local co-op here. But I said, we're just diving into this here in the last year or two on the Bass corn. But I'm trying to cut my chemicals, trying to cut my fertilizer, trying to cut my inputs drastically by moving more to the regenerative farming side. Trying to think of anything else, I guess. So,
Well, that's great to hear, Greg. And I think it's wonderful to hear that your neighbors are picking up on some of the practices that they're seeing you do. I think they probably got tired of seeing their soil end up in the ditch while yours was staying in place. So it's nice to hear that change happening.
We had
I'm
this spring here, we had 2 massive rains, so we were dry, dry, dry. The first rain we had about 3.5. Things weren't too bad, but then 12 hours later, we got between 3.5 and 4 inches in 30 minutes, and the erosion was horrible. And I had 2 neighbors that were very, very, very mad, and I started getting stopped on the road. Literally, I was checking fields, coming to the road, and they'd stop, talk to me. But I mean, we've got questions on cover crops. How are you doing this? And can you come plant for me? And basically, I've got a lot of guys stopping me, pulling out of the field, walking out of the field, asking questions on the cover crops now because the erosion up here north of Monroe in the hills is it's really, really bad. I'll just put it that way. But it's starting to change, but I think it's going to be another 3 to 5 years. I think once you get your feet wet, I always tell everybody try 40, try 80, try irrigated quarter and stick with it for 3 years. The guys that stuck with it for 3 years have now gone to 100% of cover crops now. So, and I guess I've got a lot of experience with cover crops after 11 years. We went to the twin row rye, 7.5 inch spacing. We're planting everything straight. So the cover crops are straight. We planted our corn and beans in between the strips of the cover crops. We tried 7.5 inch on an angle. We tried 15 inch on an angle. We've seen some yield reductions on corn with solid rye, planting the crop straight and the cover crop on an angle. We had 11 bushel reduction yield. So we went back to the twin row rye. I said, I do a lot of experimenting, but beans, I think you can plant beans into a solid cover crop. Don't have any issues there, but the corn, that's a little different ball game. You've got to put things in strips and plant between the strips of the cover crop. Otherwise, you're going to have some yield drag. And said, after doing this for 11 years, we've got it down to a very fine science now.
That's awesome. Thank you, Greg. I'd like to get into talk. We've touched on it a little bit, but talking about manure management, I want to go back to clay. You talked about using your composted manure on your hilltops. Can you talk a little bit more about how you manage your manure applications?
Well, we've been pretty fortunate that there's an outfit that has just recently moved into Broken Bow and basically conditions the feedlot manure. Adams Light and Cattle is the big feedlot here in Broken Bow, and so we only have to apply about a ton to the acre. If it's a bad spot, we'll put 2, maybe 3 tons if it's really bad on a hilltop or something along those lines. But it's composted manure, so it's really dry,
Hmm.
low rate of application. Um, he mixes wood chips and biochar and stuff and like it in that. So I mean, we're getting a big dose of carbon, which is, I think, maybe as important as any of the nutrients that are in there. And I mean, where organic matter is not bad. It's 2.5 to 3.5 everywhere, so which is pretty decent in this part of the world, except the hilltops, obviously. But yeah, so it's conditioned manure. We're putting down 1 to 2 tons an acre. I think we're gonna try to ramp it up and try to get every acre done. If not every year on the bad spots, maybe like every other year, just do that 1 to 2 tons. So.
And what's the goal for when to do it? Do you try the fall or early spring?
I yeah, I think I mean it when it works,
Okay.
just because like there's really not that much organic matter or not sorry, nitrogen in it. Um
Okay.
and I do appreciate what Greg was saying about big rains. We've spread I mean, I remember one year we grew peas, right? And we harvest those in like the first week of August, and then we spread, like 5 tons of kind of turned manure. It was a little bit different stuff at that time. But yeah, then we caught like a 5 inch rain, and I'm sure, like 3 miles down the creek we could smell, manure. So it was like, well, okay, we just washed away almost everything. So, but I mean, that was in August. So, you can't,
Mhm.
I'm not sure. If it rains around here, it's either 3 inches or nothing, right?
Right.
Um, but so I think there's some strategies where you know, if we're spreading on corn stubble, there's residue that's gonna hold stuff even
Mhm.
with your big winds. But ideally, like the guy that sells it to us, he likes spreading on top of snow, and I know it's a no-no in a lot of places. But he's
Okay.
like, that's how I can tell if I get an even spread pattern. And as the snow melts, as long as it doesn't melt like super, super fast, it
Mhm.
just it soaks it right into the soil just and does a perfect job. So, for us winter or like late fall, I mean, as soon as harvest wraps up, if things are open and we're not busy doing something else, and there's composted, manure available, we'll just get to work. There's no uh there's no regulations about when to spread
Currently.
around here. I know other parts of the world there are, and
Yep.
rightly so,
Yep.
but like this is such a low use rate, and I'm not that scared of it from a water quality perspective.
Sounds
And
more
there's not
stable.
yeah, all the
Yeah.
nitrogen is stable, so I mean like it would have to go through the whole nitrification process to turn into nitrates to, leach down into the groundwater. But I mean, so
Huh.
your surface water is probably the biggest concern, but we don't typically get that much moisture during the winter. So if you can get it spread like during the winter and then catch a snow and it just kind of melts it into the soil, that is just about perfect for us. So I mean,
Heavy.
timing wise, and then so like this summer after we harvest, we've got a couple pivots of rye. Um, and 1/2 pivot of rye vetch that we're going to harvest together, Greg. So if you need some vetch, but uh, so we'll spread the compost manure after rye harvest too, and then we'll just drill a grazing cover crop in after that. So it just kind of depends on our rotation on the timing, but if it's just
Mhm.
corn, soybeans, it's probably going to be late fall to early spring, just kind of whenever we can.
Great, thank you. Matt, gonna pick on you a little bit. I'm not aware of you using manure on your farm, but like in the Platte Valley there, what do you see for as far as manure applications?
So actually, this is the second year we've done some chicken litter.
Okay,
Cool.
There's I've got access to Costco's got barns everywhere. So there's getting to be some of that available.
Nice.
Friend of a friend, I sourced some. Um, Last year, um, would have been the fall of 20, if I get my dates right here, fall of 24. We applied some. We did work it in. This was it was a flat piece of ground. We had some combine ruts and we kind of tore it up for harvest. We spread the litter. We did 2 tons per acre. It was composted, just like the stuff Clay's talking about. So relatively low use rate. We worked it in. Um, Looking at the soil samples after that went into corn, looking at the soil samples afterwards, I didn't see a big bump like we really improved the ground, but I
Mhm.
we didn't screw it up. Um,
Was
you
that
know,
enough time, you think, or will the next year
yeah.
we'll
So
see it?
second year, this will be the second year. We'll see what it looks like there.
Okay.
Um, this fall we had planted rye. Again, friend of a friend said, "Hey, I got some to go. If you're interested, here's the price." So, well, so we did no-tilled it right on top of the standing rye. And Clay, I'm glad to hear that the snow is going to take it in because there was no way I was going to destroy a beautiful crop of
Mhm.
rye for this. Um, so that is, and that was not where I was doing the cover crop and all that. This year was not in the Platte Valley. And the other place I applied it was on some black ground. We haven't done a lot of um, manure applications in I'll say in the Platte Valley, that Highway 30 corridor where where it's sandy and stuff. Um, my fear is always just the water table being right there.
Yeah.
Where's it going to go? When you're applying manure, it's more of a gross amount, and I prefer to spoon feed it. And I know that's using commercial fertilizer with the colder machine and all, but I think that's a little more effective for us anyway. So
good. Thanks, Matt. I appreciate that. Greg, I'm curious with your hog barns and you're applying manure through a pivot on the same fields, like how do you manage that from a nitrogen perspective in the soil runoff for the water, water resources that could potentially be at risk?
Okay, so with multiple years of no-till 26 and 11 years of cover crops, I can take a 3.5 inch rain in 30 minutes and I have zero runoff now. And that is hard to believe. But I will invite anybody to come up and I will show you my ditches. We've even thought about digging holes in the ground at the end of the field by the culverts going underneath the road and putting a 5 gallon bucket in to show this. Because I tell you, I can take a 3.5 inch rain in 30 minutes. I am not joking. My soil structure has changed that much with the no-till and the cover crops and the earthworm populations exploding. You really have to come walk and see it to believe it. And I've got a lot of people that are asking me a lot of questions. I'm also working with the NRD at Ord, Nebraska. We are doing 30-foot soil samples. We're going down 30 feet on the north quarter there at the farm. They're looking for nitrate leaching. My parents have had hogs since 77. We've been pumping through pivots for, oh boy, probably since the 80s, probably 84, 85, 86. My dad started doing that. Now we do both pivots now, but we're not knifing it in. We're just putting it right over the top. And we'd just take a sample of the sludge and we'll send it in to kind of see what we're getting, for micronutrients and nitrogen out of that. So when I tell you I'm doing zero tillage, we're only doing the pivot tracks with the Orthman pivot track closure. That's all I'm doing. So runoff for me is not really a concern anymore. I sleep very well at night that we've switched over to what I am doing with the no-till and cover crops. When we start getting 4 inches of rain, yeah, I probably start to get a little bit of runoff. But what's coming out of my fields now with the cover crops, if the cover crops are up in the spring, well, I've taken some water samples. My water is very clean. Like in May there, most of the time I can take a water sample as it comes out. It might be a little yellow if the cover crop's dead already, but I have basically no soil coming off at all. I've got 2 water samples when I talk for ADM on regenerative farming or for Bath hybrids on regenerative farming. I bring my 2 water samples from the first year I did that, just 2 little water bottles. I took one right out of the field. I think we had about a 4 inch rain. I collected it basically clear, little bit like Mountain Dew, I guess what it looked like. I drove down the road a quarter of a mile, went to a neighboring field, and I got a water sample at his. So after that settles, after about 3 or 4 weeks, the water sample from down the road, it had almost a 1/4 inch of topsoil settled at the bottom, just very, very fine powder. In mine, you could see some plant material, probably from my cover crops, but no dirt. Then you could shake them up. Well, the one looks like chocolate milk. It is that bad. There's that much soil in that one sample. Mine, you shake it up, you can see some plant material, but there's basically zero soil in my water sample. And it really opens your people's eyes when I talk about that, show that, because like you can see the difference from tillage to no-till. So we were doing, what was it, 2000, I think. We were still doing some tillage and we were using anhydrous ammonia. We stopped all that in the fall of 2001, I believe it was, or 2000, 2001, we're playing with it. We switched over to 32% nitrogen. And I worked with Randy Zemek here in Central Valley Ag here in Monroe for over 19 years. So we're spoon feeding our nitrogen also. On center pivot irrigation up in the Clay Hills, we're doing 5 applications of nitrogen. So we're putting the first one down with the sprayer and burn down, and then running 3 to 4 applications through center pivot irrigation to spoon feed the corn up in the hills. If so, I don't have any ground that's sandy, but I worked with another individual by St. Paul, Nebraska. He's on pure sugar sand. He plants and then they start putting nitrogen on. He's doing 9 applications of 32% through center pivot irrigation. 9 applications. And what I learned from that gentleman was that if you put it all on up front, he said in pure sugar sand, you get a 1 inch rain, it'll flush it down 6 inches. If you get a 2 inch rain, it'll flush it down a foot. So if you get 2, 3, 4 inches of rain at one application, you can see for every inch it's pushing it down 6 inches. If you're doing that all up front or doing 2 applications, we're flushing it down through the sand. So we need to stop applying everything up front on sandy soil. You need to switch to center pivot irrigation. And I know some people have gravity pipe, but if you can do about 9 application on sandy soil through center pivot irrigation, he's raising 300 bushel corn. It's pure sugar sand. If that doesn't tell you something, he figured it out. He has cattle too, so they're spreading that out there also. But pure sugar sand, he's getting 300 bushel corn. And I talked to this gentleman over 6 years ago already. And I'm like, so how is he getting 300 bushel corn on pure sugar sand? And I'm struggling at 270, 280, 290. And then when I found out he's doing multiple applications of nitrogen, I switched to more applications. I'm doing 5 now. So by doing that, I was able to get over 300 bushel corn pretty consistently now. We've been pushing that 290 to about 320 bushel corn since I switched over to 5 applications of nitrogen in the Clay Hills up here in Platte County. So that's what I'm doing differently than everybody else. And that's when I speak on regenerative farming, I've been telling that to everybody else also. But no-till, cover crops, earthworms, when you start taking a 3.5 inch rain in 30 minutes, that starts to tell you how things work. We're going to pull some core samples here. This is something you probably all need to do and look at. Go get a shovel and go dig. Go dig down a foot and flip that soil up. If you're doing no-till and cover crops, the secret is the earthworms. It looks like you took a drill and drilled holes in the soil. Those earthworms, after multiple years of no-till and cover crops, I've got so many holes in the ground from the earthworms. That's why the water's going in. We kind of started playing around with that a year ago. Andrew Dixon came out from Bass Hybrids. We stuck a 6-inch piece of aluminum pipe in the ground. It was about 8 inches tall. So we slammed it in with a sledgehammer and a 2x4. And I think he put about 450 milligrams of water in a cup, and we dumped it in that 6-inch circle. In 10 minutes, it was all gone. And we had had a half-inch rain the day before. So we went ahead and we popped it up. But when we flipped it over, you couldn't believe how many earthworms holes were in that 6-inch circle when we flipped it over. It's just a piece of aluminum irrigation pipe, but I started to see the soil structure from the bottom side. You can't really see that from the top. You gotta do some digging, and it's really interesting to do that little experiments.
Thank you, Greg. I appreciate that answer. I'm going to put a survey in the chat here, as if you would please all take a moment to fill it out. It's a post-event survey. We're not quite done yet, but I'm just going to call it out, put it in here for now. Those questions might look familiar. You probably might have encountered some of them when you signed up for this event. Please humor us. We're just trying to figure out our technology and figure out what works best to kind of track what we're accomplishing here. Well, we started a little late, so if it's okay with everyone, we'll go a little late so we get enough time to answer any questions. I saw a little bit of interaction in the chat there, but I just wanted to open the floor for questions now from any of the attendees, the audience here. Got any questions that you'd like to pose?
This is Brad. If you can hear me, I have a question.
Yep, go ahead, Brad.
Yeah, hey, so I live actually not far from Andrew, but the soil right around where I live, and I'm just a small truck farmer. I'm not a big corn, soybean farmer or anything like that for local markets. My soil is probably 7.5 to 8, 7.8 when I test it. I've always been curious about how or if my phosphate or micronutrients might be getting tied up in that type of a soil, high calcium soil. And if yes, what do you do about it?
I'll jump in a little bit on this here. So we're gonna be applying humic this year in furrow in my food grade starter. I think, don't quote me, I can't remember if it's a pint to the acre of humic. I'll have to go back and ask the guys there. So I'm kind of working with Clay Hills Ag this year, east of Columbus, Nebraska. We're gonna start playing with humic in furrow and over the top of my 32%. That might help you out. I am definitely not no Midwest Labs guy to tell you all that information, but we're going to try some humic this year. I've been talking to some other guys who are doing kind of what I'm doing, but that might be one option. Otherwise, you probably need to speak to somebody at the co-op, I guess, on that. They could probably help you out which product to put on to help balance that out a little bit.
I'll just chime in a little bit. We've done the humic acid stuff. The fine product, there's a million different ones out there. I work with Schuyler Co-op just down the road too. They've got their stuff. There's just find one. The issue that we had with it, and we were trying to put it on with the planter to get it right in the root zone to help correct. It's a very black, sticky product. We never had trouble with it plugging the planter, but if you have a red ball monitor, it's worthless. So, what I haven't found a product like this yet, but you can find just the concentrated without it's fulvic acid would be it. It's a higher dollar for what I can see. I haven't been able to source any, but just Google search and see what the rest of the world does. Again, I have no experience with the fulvic acid yet, but looks like a cleaner product. So if you find some, let me know.
I've got a couple comments. So Brad, I would say and I'm not a huge believer in like, pH per se. I think in the root zone during the growing season, your plant is oftentimes going to make the pH what it needs it to be based on what nutrients. I mean, that's not 100%, right? But and I'm a soil health like hardcore guy, right? So I don't necessarily fall in line with your typical university or co-op recommendations. But I would say elemental sulfur, 100%. That's also going to unlock a lot of your micronutrients. So just as a for everybody that was talking about micronutrients, and it depends on your organic matter and your soils and everything. If it's a super light soil, if you're farming, that blow sand probably doesn't make a lot of difference. Putting everything through the pivot, like you were talking about, Greg, makes tons of sense. Um, let's see. Oh, humics. There's a lot of different humics out there. I think they all come out of like maybe 4 mines total in North America. So, you know, 4 to 5 times you're probably going to be buying the same stuff. It's just relabeled. But the thing about humics is so the liquid humics I use as a nitrogen stabilizer. I think that's where that stuff, the liquid stuff, because it's just more expensive. You can get dry like granular stuff, and there's a lot of different variations out there. Some are kind of expensive, some are kind of like really, you're like, why is this so cheap? Like, well, the expensive stuff has went through another like process, right? Sometimes it has potassium in it because they use potassium hydroxide or potassium acetate or something to like help break it down so it's more available. So it like, everybody's seen they drop the dry granular stuff in your water, and sometimes it just melts into, and makes the water black. Sometimes it sinks to the bottom. Well, those things they're both good, but they're just different. The one thing about humic is it's a carbon, right? So it's got a lot of hydrogen in it and a lot of oxygen, and the hydrogen will also help you with your pH. So you could look into dry spreading some humics on your ground, but I think the sulfur, just dropping your pH a little bit, and also your crops need a ton of sulfur anyway, and we don't get it from the rain anymore. So, that's something, and elemental sulfur, like it breaks down over the course of 2 to 3 or 4 years. So it's kind of that slow release sulfur that you don't get from like AMS or diasol or whatever. So I think people need to stop thinking about elemental sulfur as correcting a bad pH problem and actually start thinking about it as just a general, we just broad acre fertilizer. We spread 100 pounds an acre to our fields, and that's just part of our fertility program. Anyway, that's my 2 cents.
I'll kind
Thank
of
you all.
jump back in real quick here. So I've got a phone number here. If you would like to call this gentleman, I work with Randy is retired now, but we still talk once or twice a month now. Randy's probably one of the most knowledgeable people, I should say, that's worked with soil sampling and grid sampling to fix problems. So if you got a pin there, this is Randy Zemek. He's out of Fullerton, Nebraska. Randy is retired. He worked with Central Valley Ag for over 20 years. Randy was in the fertilizer business for over 30 years. So 308 550 0433. Just tell him Greg Keller said yes. So Randy does like to talk a lot. So I'm just going to warn you up front a little bit. But Randy can help you fix some of your soil issues on the high pH stuff. He's got some batches in his head. He'll tell you 50 pounds or 25 pounds or 100 pounds of this of a mix to go out there and fix those issues. So I worked with Randy for over 20 years. When he retired, I sure hated to see him go, but he always told me, if you ever got a problem, call me. I'll work with you still. So, but you may want to buy him a 6-pack of Mountain Dew or take him out for steak dinner or something too. He's got a wealth of knowledge in his head. So just he's going to give you some information, but pay him back a little bit something. So
I appreciate that. Thank you, everybody.
So we had a question in the chat from Paul. He's told that at a fertilizer meeting that excess N can tie up potassium. Has anyone heard about that?
that's a good question. I don't have an answer for you on that one. So
All right. Well, we'll have to do some more digging on that one.
That's a new one to me too.
You may have to call like Midwest Labs on that one. You're gonna have to really talk to somebody, or maybe somebody from the University of Nebraska. I'm sure somebody from a co-op, I guess. Um, Probably would have talked to somebody who's got a little more experience. If you can find somebody probably 50, 60 years of age, I probably have a little more experience on that stuff.
There was one exchange in the chat I just wanted to bring up on here because it won't show up in the recording. Garrett had asked about winter applying manure and relation to E. coli problems. And Clay did a great job in the chat uh, describing how the composted manure, those pathogens are taken care of through the composting process. Clay, could you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, I mean the guy, and this is can't even remember the outfit that I buy it from, but he sends samples in to I think Midwest Labs or somewhere several times over the course of I mean he's turning it, checking the temperature, adding water, whatever, like making sure the moisture and everything is fine, but he sends several samples in to make sure that there's no pathogens. He cooks it until um yeah, above like 160 degrees or whatever. So he's frying any of the bad stuff. Now, I completely agree. 30 tons of raw manure on top of snow, probably a bad idea. I don't know that there's ever a great time to apply that much raw manure. Um, if it's in the spring, it's, compaction and, it's too close to planting. I mean, you work it in, but I'm a no-tiller, so I don't like doing that either. So anyway, that's my 2 cents there, but I don't have a lot of concern about E. coli. I mean, my main concern about putting it on like early spring is we catch a big rain and it moves it, but that's why we try to have, a lot of active growing like rye or whatever cover crop to hopefully soak it up. And if your water infiltration is anything like Greg's, then I would never have a concern at all. I mean, like you spread it on, it's probably going to soak in almost immediately, even if there's no rain.
Good. Thank you, Clay. I appreciate that. Let's see. There was one more question in the chat or comment that I wanted to bring up. Does anyone else have any questions? You're welcome to just ask directly while I'm looking through here. Oh, here it was. Kaylin had asked about, for those of you who are irrigating, how are you using water tests to complement or complete your nutrient management? They said that the reason for the question, we're learning that our water is often causing more nutrient issues than we originally thought. We're on the learning curve right now, for sure. So anyone want to talk about maybe kind of the how you account for your water tests and your nutrient management planning?
I'll kind of jump in that. I've looked into that a little bit. So, obviously, you got to start with a water sample, send it in, see where your nitrates are, and there is a formula, and I don't remember where I've seen it. So, depending on how many circles or inches you apply, you can figure out how much nitrogen you're getting from your irrigation water. And I did that here probably 6 years ago. Basically, everybody's got nitrates in their irrigation water. It just depends how much you're applying over the top. But yeah, there is a formulation for that someplace. I'm guessing if you Google, you probably could figure out that formulation online. It'll break it down nitrates, and I can't remember if it's 1,000 gallons of water or excuse me, 1 inch. I believe that's figured by 1 inch of irrigation water per acre. There's a formulation there for nitrates parts per million. Then you'll have to take that times the amount of inches you've applied, and then it'll tell you how many pounds of nitrogen that is available with the inches of water you put on it. There is a formulation. I bet if you Google, you could probably find it online.
Yeah, so in
It,
our area too, where the nitrates are an issue and where the NRD is watching it, I could pull up the spreadsheet we got to fill out, but our nitrate levels there are 20 to 30 parts per million. And so you take that, you figure, about how much water you're going to pump on the sand. And if I remember right, it equates to about 20 pounds. It's not a lot, but it's something, I mentioned that field earlier where we put on 120 pounds. That was figured in. So there's math. Yep.
And so yeah, that the nitrates are certainly part of it. I think all your bicarbs and stuff like that is another big component, and I think that's the bigger problem for us. We don't have any nitrates in the 20 to 30 parts per million. That's, I know you guys have some issues over there. Um, but yeah, I mean, and I think Jeremy, you just asked, are the nitrates available? Nitrates are so available that if the corn wants water and nitrates, which are soluble in water, the corn soaks it up. So actually, nitrates are bad for corn generally. It's a form of nitrogen, but the friendlier form is ammonia, which is why we use melted urea in season instead of 32 because 25% of 32 is nitrate form of nitrogen. But yeah, so I guess with regards to the irrigation water, our bigger concern is the bicarbs and what's happening there and what's getting tied up in the soil. And I know I wish I could remember this off the top of my head, but I saw a good YouTube video on the difference between rainwater and irrigation water, and it is pretty incredible. The difference, like why rainwater is so much better for your crops than irrigation water. And I mean, I've seen parts of the state where pivots are completely ruined in 10 years. So if you think the irrigation water is, if it's doing that to a galvanized pivot, what do you think it's doing to the soil? And it's bad. Like this last year, guys that irrigated in our part of the world, they had worse yields than their dryland pivot corners. So, like sometimes the irrigation water, I think, depending on the quality of the water is a huge deal.
All right. Any other questions out there? Going once? Oh, here's another one. Paul asked, does your feed yard test its manure for microplastics from net wrap particles that go through the cow? Oh, that's an interesting question, Paul.
It is. I highly doubt it, but it's a good question.
I'm I'm sure it's not because, even though the manure or the compost manure that we've been spreading has been turned several times and screened and turned and screened, we still see net wrap in there. And um, yeah, it sucks. Net wrap is terrible. Anecdotally, I've got a buddy that's a vet, and he says whenever they do autopsies on cattle, they always find a big old ball of net wrap in the gut. And so you got to be good about cutting that stuff off before you feed it, but not very many people are, it seems like.
Very interesting. I had never even considered that. That's very interesting. Anything else? Well, hey, I just want to say thank you to our mentor farmers here, Clay, Tracy, Greg, and Matt. Really appreciate it. And other mentors on the call, Mark McConnell and Paul Poppy. Appreciate you guys being here. Thank you, everybody, for joining us. Felt like it was a really good conversation. We'll be posting this on the Center for Rural Affairs YouTube channel, and I will email that out to everybody when that is available. So thanks again, everybody, and I hope you have a great day.
All right.
Thanks.
Okay.
Yes,
Thanks,
thank you.
Andrew.